Hello, everyone, and welcome to Tabor Talk. So, Joe Rogan continues to grow, right? He's got his 100 million, 200 million, who knows exactly what it is, but the deal with Spotify worth more than $100 million. So, out of curiosity, I jotted down the number of subscribers on YouTube of the people I listen to and follow. So, Joe Rogan today has 9,660,000 subscribers. Okay, so I was there with Joe Rogan from the beginning. The very first episode was Christmas Eve 2009. I think there were 240 viewers. And then it slowly grew from maybe 1,000 to 5,000, whatever. But up to now, some of his shows could be anywhere between 8, 9, 10. I think Snowden was 16 million. I mean, it's just incredible. Number one podcast in the world, and destroys all the major mainstream media, just crushes. But anyway, so Rogan has 9.66 million subscribers. David Pakman has just over a million, 1.01. Oh, the Young Turks, 4.94 million. And then other guys I like, Tim Ferriss, 703,000. There's a guy, Brian Tyler Cohen, I like him a lot, 745,000 subscribers. Eric Weinstein, 236,000. And Sam Harris, 454,000. Not bad. And me, 501. To just set this next clip up, I'm not going to put the whole thing. I'll put the link. Not going to play the whole thing. I'm going to put the link in the comment section. It's Glenn Greenwood talks about this whole Rogan phenomena. Like, he's huge. He really number one podcast in the world. It really is something else. Like, even some of the top media shows, or Tucker Carlson and Sean Hannity, all the Fox guys, but they per show maybe 4 million, 5. Joe Rogan, like I said, sometimes 7, 8, 9, 10 million more. Snowden was 16 million. So the problem is, why do so many liberals hate Joe Rogan? They call him alt-right, and he's not. Joe Rogan is a liberal. Well, let me just play this clip from Glenn Greenwood.
Welcome to a new edition of System Update. I'm Glenn Greenwood. This episode explores the rapidly growing platform of Joe Rogan and his podcast, and more specifically, and I think more interestingly, the reaction to that growing influence on the part of establishment liberals and journalists with mainstream news outlets. Reaction that is becoming increasingly intense, increasingly vitriolic, and increasingly oppositional. A sign of how significant Rogan's platform has become is that several months ago, Spotify announced what is reported to be a deal in excess of $100 million paid to him for him to put his YouTube program exclusively on that streaming platform.
Hello, everybody. I have an announcement. The podcast is moving to Spotify.
Joe Rogan, one of the world's most popular podcasters, is making his show, The Joe Rogan Experience, a Spotify exclusive. This is huge industry-changing news. The show hasn't even been available on Spotify up until this point, and the company is reportedly spending potentially more than $100 million to bring it over.
And there are all kinds of metrics one can cite to illustrate just how uniquely influential and popular Rogan's program has become. But just to give you one illustrative example, Edward Snowden, the source with whom I worked in 2013 and 2014 to report on the spying done by the NSA, appeared 5 days ago on Joe Rogan's YouTube program, and already within 5 days, more than 5 million people have watched that program. That's the second time Snowden appeared on Rogan's program. The first time was 10 months ago. And just on YouTube alone, never mind the other platforms where people listen to or watch the program, that episode where Snowden appeared was watched by more than 16 million people. 16 million people, which might be a somewhat large audience for a Joe Rogan program, but not at all aberrational. And just to put that in perspective, the two most watched cable news programs are Tucker Carlson and Sean Hannity's programs on Fox News, and on good nights, they have an audience of 4 million people. So 4 times more people watched the Snowden interview with Joe Rogan just on YouTube than watched the most highly rated shows on cable news. And that 15 or 16 million people audience is something that not even network news programs, which are watched by far more than cable news audiences, can command. So it's really impossible to overstate what a significant platform that has become, what a prominent, influential voice he has become in the political and cultural landscape of the United States. And what I think makes him even more in that his audience is clearly ideologically diverse and very difficult to pigeonhole. There was recently a Pew study that was released within the last couple of weeks that asked Americans, what is your number one source of news? And for people who chose Fox News as their number one source of news, 93% of them identified as being Republican. And for MSNBC, it was very similar. For people who chose that network as the number one source of news, 95% of people identified as being Democrats. And perhaps most surprisingly of all, but most significantly of all, for people who identified the New York Times as their main source of news, 91% of them said that they were Democrats. You see how polarized and ideologically insular media outlets are becoming, really preaching to the choir on purpose as their profit model, when Rogan's audience is becoming more ideologically diverse than ever. Now, for several years as Rogan's platform grew, I wasn't ever really watching the program, and so what I knew about it was based on what people in the media were claiming. And what I was typically hearing was that Rogan's program and Rogan himself were essentially a kind of alt-right or far-right program, as evidenced by the fact that he did often has and still continues to have guests who reside on the far right end of the spectrum, whether it's people like Ben Shapiro or even people further to the right than he. And I didn't spend much time thinking about it or paying attention to it. It wasn't a program that I watched, but it was something in the ether that I was aware of, and I was aware of those claims that people were making. And yet, when I started to watch the show, not religiously or on a daily basis, but at least in an attempt to understand what the phenomenon really was, I realized, as is so often the case, how misleading and false the conventional wisdom about his program really was. It is true that he does have people who are far to the right of what is typically aired on mainstream news audiences, but it's also true that he often speaks to people on the left, or even to people who are not very ideologically identifiable. And not being ideologically identifiable is ultimately what I realized is the best way to think about Joe Rogan. He's sort of a person who tries to be a vessel for the voice of ordinary Americans, and maybe doesn't even try, actually is. He's curious about how people think. He's willing to talk to or engage with almost anyone in an attempt to understand whether there's validity to their underlying thought process, or is perfectly willing to confront people when he thinks that they're saying things that are untrue. And I think that for a lot of people who pay attention to politics, Joe Rogan first appeared on their radar screens, which is kind of odd already, the fact that he's speaking to millions and millions of people, yet only appeared on people's radar screens recently during the 2020 primary, when he said that the candidate that he liked the most was Tulsi Gabbard, followed by saying that the candidate that he liked the most was Bernie Sanders. And then the controversy that arose was when Bernie Sanders took that comment that he was willing to support Bernie Sanders and touted it in an endorsement. And Bernie Sanders' act of touting Joe Rogan's endorsement, or at least his quasi-endorsement, saying that he really liked Bernie Sanders, that he was willing to vote for him against all the other candidates, became a controversy because Democratic partisans and people in the media said that it was almost immoral or an enormous mistake for the Sanders campaign to tout the endorsement of somebody so anathema to liberal values, somebody so repellent as Joe Rogan. There were reports that even Bernie's supporters like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez were angered by and offended about the fact that the Sanders campaign touted his endorsement. Now, why would that be? In the past couple...
Okay, I'll cut it off right there. I'm going to put the whole thing, I think it's like 45 minutes. I'll put the link in the comments section, but it's Glenn Greenwald's show. So that's really preposterous. Again, the question is why? You know, Joe is a liberal, progressive liberal, and it's only, I guess you would say, he's on the right when it comes to Second Amendment. All right. Okay, very interesting, and I'll end it there. Good friends, good books, and a sleepy conscience. Wow, I'm looking at the image there. The leaves are changing here up in the Catskills. Good friends, good books, and a sleepy conscience. Peace, love, and understanding.